Amphibian Press podcast. With me today is Elizabeth Russel, and she's a fantasy author. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's so exciting.
So tell me a little bit about your book, TRINIAN. It's your second fantasy novel, correct?
Yes. So TRINIAN is a soldier who discovers he is a king, but a power-hungry god wants to kill him and take his birthright. So the story revolves around TRINIAN, his sister Lavendir, and his advisor, Adria. So 2 women and a man. And I actually had the idea for it when I was much younger. I think I was 13. I read The Lord of the Rings. I watched the movies, tried reading the book, and was like, there are no girls. This is boring, and I gave up. So I was like, there needs to be a fantasy epic about girls. So I sat down and came up with like 6 different romances and put them all into a book and had no idea that what I was setting myself up for. So later on, years later, as I'm trying to actually realize this story, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is way too much. There's like too many main characters and too many romances and everybody lives. This is really weird. So it's taken quite a different turn from how it started, but it's definitely, no longer just about, having women in the story. It's also, it's branched out into a bit more depth than that, I think. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's just an epic tale of, pure evil trying to destroy goodness in the world. And there's other gods in the story who, kind of like the Iliad, they try to figure out, should they be helping the mortals? Should they not be helping them? But unlike the Iliad, they are accountable to a higher power. And so they're trying to figure out what that higher power wants from them. So there's a lot of politics going on in the god world, and then also in the human world, where the mortals are trying to figure out, is it worthwhile to try and defeat this evil that seems so monumental against us, and how do we respond to this? And they respond in fear. Some respond in most of them respond in fear, and they kind of have to figure out, one responds in selfishness, and they have to figure out how to actually be good people and what that means. So yeah,
that's really cool. I love the idea of like multiple tiers of gods and things like that. Mm-hmm. I do the same thing with my own fantasy series. So
oh yay. I love it.
And also like imperfect gods, like you mentioned, mm-hmm. the Iliad, and how the Greek gods, have like they're kind of human for gods.
Yes, very.
What we're used to, modern day types of thing. So that's mm-hmm. that's really fun. What did you where did you draw from for your pantheon of gods? Do you have any like cultural influence, or did you just sort of like throw in whatever you wanted there?
I mean, I'm Catholic, so it definitely came, pretty heavily from that, I think. I loved the Iliad and the Odyssey, so I liked the Greek mythology, and I liked kind of exploring that and what it would look like if you took some of these more Catholic principles, like, mm-hmm. can gods be selfish or not, and why does that resonate so much with us? Like as human beings, there seems to be like, okay, if there is only one other divine power out there, then why do we resonate so much with this idea of some gods being not good and some gods being good? And I think, as Catholic, we don't just believe that there's God in the Trinity, but we also believe in angels and demons and all that, right? So there's like this level of like the spiritual world that is just very strange. We know very little about. And if that were to look just a little bit different in a fantasy world, what would it be like? Mm-hmm. And I definitely was inspired by C.S. Lewis, with his Magician's Nephew and everything. And also his Till We Have Faces, which is his best book, in my opinion. It's an adult novel, and it's kind of takes from the myth of Psyche and Apollo, I think. I'm probably getting that wrong. Psyche and Cupid. Not entirely sure who the god is in that story, but it's really good. So yeah, those were probably my main influences. And like I said, also, Lord of the Rings. Very much that too.
Well, I mean, C.S. Lewis and Tolkien were,
buddies, yes.
Yeah. So it makes sense that they sort of build off one another for sure.
Exactly.
I think that's really interesting because we do, obviously gods and pantheons are a huge thing in fantasy, but we don't always talk about where we are coming from with that, unless if it's like an obvious analog, like it's just
Right.
very clearly analogous of, like the Greek myths or whatever.
Exactly.
That's sort of fun is, going back to those more classic roots for sure.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of
like it.
Going back to classics, you also do fairy tale retellings. So tell me a little bit about that, because that's sort of a fun twist.
Yeah, so I've kind of dwindled off from that a little bit, but not too much. I have a blog called thefairytaleblog.com, and it definitely started as retelling fairy tales. Since my brother he's now 5, but when he was 2, he loved fairy tales. So I would just, take a fairy tale and I just kind of put a twist on it and I tell it to him and he loved it. So I was like, I'm telling stories like every day here. I should just write them down. So I started that blog and I loved it. And it really improved my writing because I was writing every day and people were seeing it. You had to make it good because people were going to be reading it. So I did that. And then as it grew and it got in following, and I was trying to figure out, like, what do I want to do with my life? Like, how do I want to help the world? What do I want to make my life about if this was to really take off and I was to really make this intentional? And I love the classics. I love fairy tales, myth, but also, the classic novels, Moby Dick, Dickens, Jane Austen, right? All that kind of stuff. And so I thought, well, what if I started writing book reviews? What if I started, but not for books coming out, but for classics? So I've been doing that, and the Fairytale Blog has, it still has some of my retold fairy tales and such, but more it's about, it's going in the direction of, helping people feel like they can approach the classics because they feel so overwhelming sometimes. We don't really know where to go with them, or even like you could look up Little Women in a book and you can't just turn it over to read a description of what the book's about. If the back of the book says anything, it's going to be, the commentary in this book delves into Louisa May Alcott's past, and you're like, but I just want to read the book. Like, what is this book about? I've heard of it, but I don't know. So yeah. So if someone wants to know that without spoilers, they can look it up, they can find out. And I also introduce people to other readers. I do interviews with people who like to read the classics, or people who have made that their job is something related to that. And then I also just write articles about tips and stuff, or resources like apps and stuff that make reading easier. So yeah, so that's all tied into that. That's the Fairytale Blog.
Yeah, I think that's kind of interesting because a lot of we're reading classics usually in high school English or what have you, college if you go to school for literature, and in a lot of ways it is sort of removing itself from this actual reading and enjoyment of the story. It's all about the analyzing of it and what did the author really mean here, and I think you can lose some of the connection to the actual stories when you get that far removed from the actual work itself. So that's neat that you're going in as if you're this new reader exploring these things. That's fun.
I was going to say that I even encourage people to skip some of the boring parts if they're reading it for the first time, not to get all, caught up in these really long Dickens descriptions and stuff. If they're just trying to get it, just finish it. There's a huge achievement just in that. So. No,
that's awesome. So, like we said, it's your second book that's coming out. Tell me a little bit about your first book, Half-Breeds.
Yeah, sure. So, Half-Breeds was a much quicker enterprise than TRINIAN. I wrote it in a span of 2 years, and it's about a group of children. It starts out with 8 children who are running from humanity because they are half human and half this monster called chumps that live in the forest. And humanity, the humans in the vicinity, they're led by this religious zealot who claims that chumps are demons, and that when the chumps come and they kidnap the women, and then the women give birth to these half-breed children. And he says that they're demons infiltrating their midst, and they have to kill them in order to purify themselves. So some of these children manage to escape, and they start to make this home in the wild. and they have to, it's kind of my response to Lord of the Flies. It was kind of like, okay, what if a bunch of children went off and lived by themselves and they didn't turn totally awful? Like, what if they actually tried to make a good life for themselves, and what would that look like? So the book is, the kids are just, I love them all. They're all like so honest, and they're just struggling with, you know, the questions that we all struggle with in life. Bobakin is the main character, and he just wants the best for everybody that's under his care, and he's always trying to figure out what that is. Yeah, so that's Half-Breeds, and it's just kind of like episodic adventures until it culminates in a final conflict at the end, that takes up like the third part. It's in 3 different parts. So
I like that, because I think a lot of children nowadays are struggling with, I mean, it's definitely getting better, but with certain narratives, you know, people will see themselves in characters, but oftentimes, you know, like if it's a more marginalized person, it's like, oh, well, they're only ever like the bad person or the evil person or the dumb person or whatever it is. And, you know, you can get kind of bogged down in like, well, wait, is that what I'm supposed to be?
mm-hmm.
And I like that you're exploring these children who are told like, oh, well, you're half demon, you're evil, you're, you know, gonna destroy our society, and yet all they want to do is just live and be good. And you're showing that that's actually what they're doing. That's a nice twist on that.
Yeah.
Sure.
With these trying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
No one's perfect.
Right. And that's what they have to learn.
Now, is there something like, is there a theme that runs through your works, or something that you're subverting as you're working through these classics and these fairy tales? I mean, you've definitely touched on some things, some twists that you have, but is there an overarching message that you have?
Not intentionally, but I think looking back on it, I had to ask myself that question recently. And I think looking back on it, I definitely, wonder is a very big theme for me. And I like to, I always try to make sure that I'm wondering at things that are totally normal, like a sunset or a flower, right? That there's something, or even just like a child talking. To me, there's not much difference between the really simple miracles that we take for granted and like bigger miracles that happen. And so for me, I think I want to kind of show with these bigger events, show the wonder that can actually happen, that's actually just normal, everyday, beautiful things that we take for granted or tend not to notice. So I think I like to highlight that, and I kind of like to use fantasy as a means to get to that. So yeah, and in my fairy tales, I think that's pretty much more obvious, especially my poetry. Okay, no, I take that back. My poetry tends to be dark, but I always have a thread of hope running through, or wonder, that gives like even the darkest scenario its little bit of hope. So
I like that. Yeah, the awe. We need more awe in our world. We need more appreciation for beauty. I mean, there's so many ugly things going on that it's really hard to, I think, remember that there's beauty.
Sure.
But we need it more now than like ever in a lot of ways.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
So do you have plans to expand either of these words, these worlds, like either Half-Breeds or TRINIAN? Is that something you're exploring as like a series, or are they standalones?
Not at the moment. When Half-Breeds was finished, I said I would never write a sequel. But now every once in a while I get ideas. So who knows? It wouldn't be a direct sequel, but it might take place in the world. Same thing for TRINIAN. I've always said no sequel. Like the book is very long. It's 500 pages. It could have been split up into several different volumes, and I just never decided to do that. So I was always like, no, it's already a sequel in of itself, you know? Mm-hmm. But I think, again, that if I was to write another story, it wouldn't be a direct sequel, but it could take place in the world. I see that potentially happening, but not something I'm actively planning.
So what is next for you project-wise? What's your current work in progress? I mean, I know we all have like 5 of them, but
yeah. Probably the next one would be well, some of it's not writing. I'm doing a podcast with my brother. Actually, we're going to launch it very soon. It's Literary Leviathans, where we read books, classics, and we talk about our experiences reading them. But aside from that, with my writing, I think the next book, once I officially get TRINIAN underway, will be The Red Shoe, which I started as a fairy tale and turned into a longer story quite a while ago, and it got put on the back shelf because I was working on TRINIAN, and I'd really like to take it up again. It's about a sister who, twin brother and princess and prince who were separated at birth, and she never knew she had a brother. She finds out later, and with the help of some magic red shoes, she finds him and has to rescue him from a prince, and there's also an evil dark elf that's involved. So
that sounds like so much fun.
Yeah, I like sibling stories a lot. So, and I haven't actually done any yet. So I'd like to get that into a novel.
Well, maybe you can draw from working with your brother on the podcast. You can pull from that experience.
Yes. Yes.
And I do think that sibling relationships and really close friendships are needed, because so much of, as fun as romance is to read and to write, I think we need to remember that friendship and siblings and family is just as important, if not more important sometimes. So
sure. Yeah, and I'm one of 8 kids.
oh, wow.
So we've got a lot to draw on that, I think.
Yeah, my mom was one of 6, so I'm an only child.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I get the big family thing. My mom's brother's actually here helping us with our deck right now. So
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you probably grew up with cousins then too.
Oh, yeah. There was. Yeah. we're all pretty close, so that's nice. But makes up for the no sibling thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I had quite a few siblings as well, or cousins. So yeah, I understand that.
So where can people find your work and find you? And you mentioned the Fairytale blog already, but if they want to find you online, where?
That's kind of the central hub. Okay. Yeah. So the fairytaleblog.com, that's the central hub. And then if they want to find me on social media, Pinterest is probably my biggest platform. Okay. So yeah, I didn't think about this. I think while I tell you my Instagram, I'm going to make sure that I have the right handle for Pinterest here, because I don't usually say it out loud. Oh yeah, it is the Fairytale Blog. So just search for the Fairytale Blog on Pinterest and you'll find me. And then Instagram is, oh yeah, perfect. Instagram would be Liz of the Shire would be my handle. Liz of the Shire, as in like the Hobbit Shire. And you could also follow the Fairytale Blog, but I think I might be dropping that one. I just had more success with Liz of the Shire. So we'll see. But I have 2 Instagram places right now for the moment.
Awesome.
So there you go. And, that's me. Yeah.
If folks want to pre-order TRINIAN, which will be going live on the 11th, so just shortly after it goes live. If folks want to pre-order that, can they find it on Amazon?
So the best way to do it would be to come to my website. They could find it on Amazon. I'm self-publishing with KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just looking up TRINIAN and Epic Fantasy on Amazon by Elizabeth Russel. And then, but in order to know the details to get the special promotions that go with the pre-order, they would want to come to my blog, because we're giving out some a free map, and some other fun things. So
I love maps.
Yay! My sister is doing it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she is an amazing artist, and I tell you, I knew it would be amazing when she did it, but it's better than I ever dreamed. She's doing like little pictures on it. Like it's awesome. So, and then my other sister is making a page from a Minerva bestiary. So Minerva is the world, and we're like pretending like there's a bestiary out there, which maybe we'll make someday. And there's a page from it, and it tells about like how the Gorgons, which are the monsters in the story, how their anatomy and everything, and what they can do. So.
That is so cool. See, that's why we need siblings, right?
Yes.
They can help us with our projects.
Yes.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, I think that's about our time. And I'll definitely, you know, put all the links in the show notes and everything. And
Awesome.
people, go follow her, go pre-order it, please. I'm going to go do that right now. And definitely keep us updated on your work.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. This has been the Amphibian Press podcast. I'm Sara Boris, and with me today was Elizabeth Russel, and thanks for listening.